Well, KwaZulu-Natal government today launched integrated government campaign to reinforce efforts to fighting the scourge of gender-based violence and femicide across the province. Currently, the province is leading when it comes to cases of violence against women, including rape cases. To tell us more about the campaign, when I joined via Zoom by KwaZulu-Natal Premier Sihle Zikalala. Premier, very good afternoon to you. Thank you for joining us here on SABC News this afternoon, sir.
Thank you, and thank you for having us in your program.
It's 16 days of activism against gender-based violence begins today. KZN being one of the most problematic provinces in our country when it comes to GBV. How will it be observed in the province? But Premier, on the back of that, what have you as leadership in the province picked up as being really the main reasons for the province really to be leading in cases of GBV?
Well, one central thing that is common is the use of drugs and alcohol. There is a relationship between the abuse of drugs and alcohol as well as gender-based violence. If you will see in terms of numbers, most of the people who are raped, they get raped in nearby taverns or in areas where there will be a selling of alcohol. And that also tells you, because it also goes with crime sports. So that's why we have said, let us have an integrated approach, which will go on not only for 16 days, but throughout, because we do need to build the stakeholder relations, a big campaign where all of us will participate to curb this scourge of gender-based violence. But more than that, we also are aiming to intervene directly and improve policing and prosecution of those who are involved in such acts. We are also going to be supporting the victims, because it is important that the victims are supported, both in terms of ensuring that the cases are attended and addressed and the perpetrators are arrested, but also in terms of counseling and economic support so that the livelihood of victims will not become miserable.
Premier, I'm one to always say that, the issue of gender-based violence should be focused on not just as we observe the 16 days of activism. And I'm glad that you're saying that, your integrated approach is really about looking forward and not just focusing on the 16 days per se. But we are coming into December, Premier, and you would know that your province, and in particular Durban, is very busy during this time. And, you talk about alcohol, and I'm glad that you did. There's always the issue of alcohol in the mix, and it also causes problems when it comes to gender-based violence, the partying that comes along with it. Now we also have a new thing that's come into it, and that's the issue of coronavirus, which we've been dealing with throughout the year. How is the province readying itself for all these combined issues that they're then having to deal with as we're slowly but surely going into December?
Indeed, these are two pandemics, the pandemic of gender-based violence, but COVID-19. We are aiming, and we have a plan to ensure that we put in place measures to mitigate the issues of COVID-19. We are going to enforce the regulations because we are still on lockdown level 1. So all of us must follow the rules as they are. We are going to enforce sanitization in public areas. We're going to be enforcing wearing of masks and social distancing. While we know that people will be flocking to Durban, but also we would want them to be safe and protect themselves and their loved ones. We are going to also go out on the safety campaign to deal with crime, because if there is whenever there are occasions like festive season and others, you see that there are criminal activities that get escalated in areas such as Durban. And we want to promise the people of South Africa that Durban will be one of the safest cities during this coming festive season. And therefore, they should feel free to come, but preserve regulations when it comes to COVID-19.
Premier Zikalala, one of the issues I'm concerned you didn't raise when I asked about, the reasons that your province might be leading in this problem of GBV is the fact that, large parts of KZN are deeply rural, as you would know. And there might be some backward, perhaps, thinking on the part of some men when it comes to the treatment of women. How do we get men, and I'm going to specifically talk about KZN because that's where you are. How do we get the men in KZN to accept that, gender relations are really a sort of changing and for them to evolve? I mean, it's really quite normal in some of these places where men are really objectifying women and believe it's okay to discipline women, and that might mean, raising a hand at a woman. So how are you kind of looking at that? If you're looking at the 16 days of activism and looking forward into that might be quite an important aspect of gender-based violence if we're to zoom in specifically on the rural areas in KZN.
Yes, you are quite correct. That backwardness and that stereotype thinking is wrong and need to be attended to. We are engaging in a program that brings together the government, which will be the provincial government, municipalities, the church leaders, the traditional leaders in respective districts. And through those programs, we will have forums where we will be engaging with men on how to conduct themselves, how to behave, and educate them about the need to respect women. We are also starting a program focusing to young boys because it is important that young boys also are educated and orientated properly to respect the rights of women and ensure that we are all together in the fight against gender-based violence and the abuse of women.
I'm sure you're aware that there are some NGOs. I'll give an example of Tutuzela centers that are fighting gender-based violence, and they've been complaining about the lack of funding in the province. And it's really important while I have you with us on the show to talk about this. No doubt, a lot of funding has also had to be kind of redirected to the fight against COVID-19. I have no doubt that's part of the issue that we've kind of had to see, a cap being really put on some of the other fundings that you might have had to do in the province. But this is really an important aspect, and to have these NGOs who are really trying throughout the year, not just during 16 days, to do something about the scourge of GBV. Really upset about the fact that they don't have the funding that they need to address the issue. So, Premier, please, if you can tell us what's being done, what's being looked into, alternative funding. What are your ideas?
Well, we can safely say that despite the fact that we are constrained financially as government in the country and in the province, we continue to support the NGOs that work to provide social relief to the people. We also have Tutuzela centers which are operated by the government through the Department of Social Development. All of those have been prioritized and are not going to be compromised in terms of the funding. It is important that the livelihood of our people is protected and guaranteed. And we have gone an extra mile to ensure that we inspect their functionality and ensure that they work according to the expected standards.
All right, Premier, thank you very much for giving us your time. Premier of KZN, Sihle Zikalala. Thank you, sir.